Hello and welcome, dear listeners, to episode 120 of The Reformed Gamers, the show all about theology, video games, Norse mythology, and busting things up and it turning into an episode of Dragon Ball Z. I'm your wish I had a bigger beard host, Logan.
And I am his co-host, Adam.
And I am Matthew Millsap from Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary.
Nice.
There you go. Dear listeners, we brought Matt on to the show because I actually caught Matt on Twitter talking about God of War. And Matt, you might have to remind me, I don't remember exactly what it was you were speaking to specifically, but I saw this string of tweets and I'm like, yo, we need to get him on the show to help us discuss this game because this is a pretty big game. And now me and you kind of go back a little bit because we met at seminary, so I know you a little bit, but one of the things I remember about you is that you had a passion about video games, and you even wrote your dissertation on video games, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right. So I did my PhD in systematic theology at Southwestern Seminary in Fort Worth, and I wrote my dissertation on the relationship between theology and video games, trying to kind of come up with a framework to view video games theologically.
Right on, man. Was there any...
What do we got to do to get a copy of this? Just said.
Yeah, so it's freely available online, but I'm happy to email it to anyone who asks, or if you just want to find me on Twitter, I'm Matt Millsap on Twitter, and you just connect with me there. I'm happy to pass my dissertation along to anyone who's interested.
Awesome.
Nice.
I still need to read that myself. I kept meaning to get a copy, and I kept forgetting, but... I'll definitely look into that. So Matt, real quick, man, before we go any further in the show, man, let the dear listeners know what's your favorite game of all time. I know that's a hard question, but if you can think of one, go for it.
Sure. So a little bit of nostalgia at play here, I will admit, but that is Final Fantasy VI. Although when I played it was Final Fantasy III for the Super Nintendo. Yeah, so that's my all-time favorite game. I've played it multiple times. I love it. I mean, I just pretty much love everything about it, even the quirky translation, that happened back during the SNES era and everything. So it was pretty much, I mean, when I was growing up, I think I was 13 years old when I played it the first time, right when it came out. And it was like the game, if you will, that really got me into games as a storytelling medium, moving beyond, just games as something that was fun and everything as far as like the actual mechanics or how the game played. But in terms of viewing video games as a medium for telling stories and telling, pretty long and detailed narratives, Final Fantasy III was really sort of this eye-opening experience for me. And so, I love it.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favorites. So I've got to know, man, between Final Fantasy 6 and 7, which one's better?
All right, so I'm going to say 6.
Yes. Do you hear that, Jesse Knopp?
He just said it's his favorite game of all time. It makes sense that he's going to say 6.
I know, but I wanted to say it. So.
I think Logan's referencing the, sort of the internet debate that goes on amongst old school gamers or gamers who are old enough to have played both of those when they originally came out. And you have, the huge Final Fantasy VII crew that's out there that's like, Final Fantasy VII is the greatest, because I think for a lot of them, that was like the first RPG that they ever encountered.
Yeah.
And so it was so sort of like formative in their lives that they tend to overlook a lot of the flaws that are actually there in Final Fantasy VII. So I would give the edge to 6.
Oh man, Matt,
I can't speak to it at all.
Matt, I'm gonna bring you back on.
Played a Final Fantasy,
and we're gonna break these games apart and go in-depth analysis.
Hey, I'd love to do that. Just an entire episode dedicated to 6 versus 7. That would be amazing.
It's happening. I'm writing it down in my notebook here, and I'm gonna make it happen.
I'll take that episode off. That'll be a good one when I'm out of town.
Adam, just play 6 and 7 before we do it, and then we can all just roundtable it. Oh
man, ain't nobody got time for that.
Oh, you got time, dude. You gotta play it. You gotta at least play 6. You don't gotta play 7. You can skip that, but at least play 6.
I've got 7 on the Vita, just waiting for me.
Play it.
I'm trying to think. Which one was 6 on the SNES Classic?
I think so.
It's on there.
It's on there. It's 3.
Yep.
So I've got them both.
There you go.
But I've also, as we were talking before, got Ni no Kuni 2, Frozen Wilds. I've got this fall with 1 billion games coming out.
That's true. There are a lot of games coming out.
I would love to. I've also got a 6-month-old daughter who has destroyed any reading that I used to get to do. It's kind of it's a mess. But anyways, this isn't about me. Matt, what are you playing on currently? What's your go-to system right now?
It's mostly PlayStation 4, but I also have an Xbox and a Switch.
Nice.
Oh,
man, the whole triple threat right there.
Yeah.
Are you playing on PC?
Not so much. Mostly a console gamer. I think that owes kind of like it's what I've always done, and I like the ease of just being able to plug it in and have it work instead of having to deal with updates all the time and drivers and installations, that kind of thing.
Yeah, all that fun stuff, viruses and everything. Yeah. Well, cool. Dear listeners, you're going to get to hear more from Matt later on in the episode, but just some real quick housekeeping before we go any further. Dear listeners, if you are supporting us on Patreon, head over to patreon.com/thereformedgamers to check out our posts about some of the changes we'll be making to our reward tiers. There's a document that is linked to that post. Go ahead and read that. Give us your feedback. Give us your thoughts. Whether you like the changes or you hate the changes, let us know so that way we can make those as best as we possibly can. Leave your feedback on that post there in Patreon. Or if you have me on Facebook, you can do that too, either way. But as always, this is the second episode of the month, or maybe it's the third one. I don't know. I've lost track because of E3 just warping my mind. So this is our game giveaway episode for our dear patrons, those of you that support us on patreon.com. Even if you support us at just the $1 tier, you get entered into this giveaway once a month. So I'm going to go ahead and shake up the names here in my headphone case because I left my hat in the other room and I'm too lazy to go get it. So the winner for this episode that gets a free game is Eric Bryant. Dude, check your Patreon messages. Or actually, I have you on Facebook, so I'll probably just message you there. Either way, you're going to get a message from me. We'll see what kind of game thing we can work out for you, good sir. But, as always, welcome to the Reformed Gamers. Without further ado, we're going to get into the show. So we're going to start the show like we always do with a little bit of what we've been playing and what we've been reading. First up, what have you been reading? Brought to you by Dear VIP, Richard Marroquin, for supporting us at the $25 tier and above. Thank you, Richard. Appreciate that. Matt, since you are the guest of honor, man, let the dear listeners know, what have you been playing?
So lately I've a little bit late to the party here, but playing Undertale. And
nice.
So yeah, it was, kind of a shorter RPG that's in the vein of, SNES RPGs from back in the day. I was a big fan also at that time of Earthbound. And so I don't know if either of you guys have ever played Earthbound, but perhaps some of the listeners have. And so, yeah, Undertale, just a sort of a quirky, sort of shorter RPG in a retro style, really well done and enjoyable. And I've had a good time playing that.
Nice. Now, you say it's like the old school SNES RPGs. What are some of the games that you might relate this to? Because I haven't played the game yet.
Okay, yeah, so very much in the same vein as Earthbound in terms of the quirkiness of Earthbound. So, Earthbound is part of the fabled Mother series of games. So every E3, I'm sure many are aware of this. There's this crowd out there, this internet crowd that is consistently badgering Nintendo to release Mother 3 in the United States because it never made its way over. And so I would be part of that crowd who would like to see Mother 3 make its way over. But basically, Earthbound, which is Mother 2 in the series in Japan, was sort of this offbeat, quirky RPG that was in the style of SNES 16-bit RPGs at the time. And so Undertale is a lot in that vein in terms of the story and the characters and everything. It's not meant to be taken super seriously, but kind of one of the main hooks of Undertale is that the actions that you take in the game actually do really matter. They truly matter and have repercussions later on. And the game saves in such a way that even if you go back and like reload previous saves because you don't like the way things turned out, the game actually remembers what you did. And so you'll have characters who will say stuff like, oh yeah, I know what you did in going back and trying to reset your save or loading a previous save so you can avoid this or that or whatever. And so, I mean, you could tell that it's really, really smartly programmed. And amazingly enough, it was programmed almost entirely by just one guy, Toby Fox.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was originally, it was a Kickstarter project that he did. And so it's very impressive in that respect as well. Of course, he gets, some help from some other people on some of the art and things like that. He composed the soundtrack himself. And so, it's just a really fun game. I recommend you checking out. I think it's probably on sale right now during the Steam summer sale for the PC players out there. It's also available on PC or PS4, which is where I'm playing it currently.
I'm gonna have to look that up because the moment you said the thing about you trying to reload a save and it remembers what you did, I'm like, I'm already in. I'm up for anytime a game pulls some kind of like weird existential crisis kind of thing like that. I'm like, dude, I'm totally there. I'm totally there.
Well, I don't want to say, I won't say too much more than to avoid spoilers and everything, but you'll definitely enjoy it sort of breaking the fourth wall in some instances where you're kind of like, whoa, I can't believe that they actually did that and they kept up with what I was doing here.
That sounds so
Yeah,
amazing.
I know it's got a big cult following. I mean, I don't even know if you call it cult following. A lot of people just really like the game. And so it's one that's kind of, I don't know if I've had my eye on it. It's always been like, okay, if this thing goes on the deal, it's also out for the Vita. So, as I'm looking for more JRPGs to pile on, or that's not necessarily JRPG, but RPGs to pile into the Vita, it's definitely one that I need to continue to keep an eye out.
Yeah, and I think in a Nintendo Direct earlier this year, they announced it was coming to Switch at some point in 2018
really?
also.
I'll just wait for that version then. I'll play it on the Switch. Cool. Yeah. So Adam, man, what have you been playing?
Dude, life has been interesting. I've been in a weird position just gaming wise where I've wanted to game, but I haven't been able to play exactly the games that I want to play. So it's like I've been playing a lot of Stardew Valley, and I enjoy Stardew Valley, but it hasn't been like I really want to play Ni no Kuni 2. And as I was telling you guys before, we've been moved out of our apartment for basically 2 weeks, and I haven't got to play it. But like that's what I want to play, and since I can't play that, I'm like playing Stardew almost just like, well, I don't have anything else to play, so I'll. But that being said, I finally got through the first year, and now I'm like hooked again. I'm like, it sucked me in because I've got money, I've got a farm that's flourishing, I've got sprinklers, so I don't have to like go around and water. Which again, I didn't know what I was doing, but watering plants one by one because I didn't know if you held the button down, it would water more. I know, total noob move. But I've got like an automated farm now. I've got a lot of different things. Like I got to check on the chickens and the ducks. I've got to check on the cows and the goats. I've got to make sure my cheese is getting, my milk's being turned into cheese. So I played some on our way home on a trip yesterday. Hannah drove for a couple hours, and man, I got like 4. And I was gonna do a couple things today, but the rain and some other stuff canceled that out. So I got like 3 or 4 more days in. So it's kind of sucked me in hard now that I'm through the first year. Yeah, and I see an end in sight to the community center, knowing okay, I gotta get this in the spring, this in the summer, this in the fall because I missed them last year. So I'll be finishing up the community center. All my relationships in town are kind of crappy. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if I'll end up getting married to anybody in the game. Being that my only really good relationship is with a single girl. So maybe we'll just be good friends. But of course. So yeah, I don't know if I'll be focusing on that, the relationship side, but I've been enjoying that, but Lord willing, we'll be back in our apartment. Hopefully tomorrow, as we're recording this, or at the latest come Monday when this is dropping, and I can get back into Ni no Kuni 2. I picked up last week in the days of, or the game, the days of play sale.
Oh yeah.
The complete edition to Horizon Zero Dawn with Frozen Wilds. I've got that waiting for me. I got Mario Tennis coming in the mail tomorrow. So, I'm going to have a lot more to play. And, I'm not going to go into it now, but I might have to do a personal loot box where I got all this pent up E3 conversation just sitting on my mind and on my chest as I was listening to you guys talk about it. I've got plenty of thoughts, and it stinks that I just happened to be gone at basketball camp last week, so I couldn't record. But I've got to find a time. I'm just like got pent up E3. It's not anger. It's excitement. It's thoughts. It's
all that hype,
shade.
man.
It's a lot of mixture of a lot of things. But I think you guys crushed the episode last week, so it was fun listening to those guys join you. But yeah, mainly just been playing some Stardew Valley. I did get a free copy of Shaq Fu Legend Reborn because I bought NBA Playgrounds when it initially came out. That game is goofy, and I wouldn't say kid friendly. Not because of anything more than language. So Shaq swears a couple times. It's got a lot of funny jokes in the beginning, but if you're not wanting, again, it's not like crazy language, but probably in the first half hour, there's 4 to 5 swear words. So for us old school gamers, it's got some nostalgia to it, but I wouldn't probably describe it as a very good game more than just a nostalgic game. So that's another game I got to play a few minutes of.
Right on. Well, dear listeners, I think Adam said this in the pre-show. I'm about 8 months too late on this, but I just now got into Fortnite. So I've fallen down that rabbit hole, bought the battle pass, bought the Omen skin for those of you that even know what that is and thinks it's cool. I think most of our listeners are like, you spent money on this game, Logan? Really? Wow. But it's so good. They put it on the Switch. I can play with my students. If they're on Xbox or if they're on mobile or if they're on the Switch, it doesn't matter. I can play with them. We already talked about last episode about that whole debacle between Fortnite and PS4 and all that other jazz. So I won't go to it here. But the game is it's so much fun. And there's something about playing it on the Switch, man. Something about playing it on the go that just makes it even more enticing, I guess. And I think it's just that portable play. And I'm having a lot of fun with it. My only real complaint with the game so far is the fact that, well, I guess there's 2 complaints, is that the fact that when I use a shotgun, it takes like 4 or 5 shots to take someone down, but someone else uses a shotgun on me with 1 shot and I go down, even if I have a full shield, it makes no sense to me whatsoever. And it just makes me want to rage so bad. And one of the other things that I was kind of surprised by. So, of course, since I'm getting into Fortnite, I'm watching Ninja on YouTube, and I was watching him do some gameplay with the Omen skin, and I was like, that's a cool suit. I want that. So I log on to check it out, and I see it's 2,000 V-Bucks, and I'm like, okay, how much is that exactly? So I go to the store and check it out. It's about $20 just for a skin, and I'm thinking, this is insane. You can go play Assassin's Creed, Street Fighter, whatever. Those skins will range from $2 to $5. And this one is $20. So I don't know what's more disconcerting, the fact that they charge that much or the fact that they make so much money every single time that they release a new skin. Because I talked to one of the managers I know that works at a retail store nearby, and they were telling me that every single time that they release a new skin like that, they make a insane amount of money that week because people come in and buy V-Bucks like crazy to get the new skin. To which one of my parents of my students told me, it's really just like paper dolls. Like when we were kids, you'd have your little paper doll thing and then you make the clothes and you put it on there. That's really what it is. And then I was looking at my skin and I quickly went from excitement to like, oh man, this is just shameful. Like I just spent $20 on a digital piece of paper for my character, and okay.
Well, there's a couple things that go with that, because first of all, GameStop needs that, because if you guys didn't see in the news today, they're apparently looking for someone to buy them out because they must not be making much money. And secondly, in the little news drop, I think they said that last month Fortnite made $100 million.
Golly.
And so it's like
insane.
It is absurd.
So
how much money.
Let me get this straight. They made $100 million last year, and they can't balance out the freaking shotguns. Are you kidding? Last month.
Not even year. Just last month alone.
Epic, balance your stuff out. Come on.
Well, not even balancing, man. The shooting mechanics. Again, I love the game. It's a ton of fun. But let's not act like those guns are very accurate.
No, they're not.
You know what I'm saying?
They're really not.
It's like you're shooting a guy. If you're shooting a guy across the map, I mean, if you're professional, sure, you're good. But like, or if you're using a mouse and keyboard, that's one thing. But man, playing on a console, and maybe a lot of people just say, Adam, get good, and that is probably a majority of what this is.
Yeah,
Adam needs to get good. But I'm like, I'm pretty good at a lot of other shooters, but shooting across the map and just the way that, yeah, I feel like their shooting is more than not way off.
Yeah.
And when you watch streamers, they're like, how did I not hit that guy? How did I not hit that guy?
Yep.
It's just constantly so.
I've seen Ninja rage a couple times.
Yeah, Matt, have you gotten to Fortnite?
I'm terrible at it. I've played a handful of matches because my kids are into it, and so, they're trying to teach me. They're trying to show me different things, but I inevitably, die pretty quickly as far as the matches go. My initial strategy was to kind of hide out and everything, but then I quickly realized that's not going to work very well because you have to actually kill the other people and take their supplies and stuff. Right? Yeah, exactly. To beef yourself up, and so if you're hiding all the way until say there's like 5 people left, then you're just going to get owned.
Yeah.
So who's the best Fortnite player in the house?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, my oldest son would say himself, of course, and my daughter would say that she's better than him. They're probably pretty evenly matched, though, I think.
Man,
right
there it is.
There you go. Anyway, dear listeners, if you're playing Fortnite, let us know because I'll totally play because I'm all in on it now. 8 months after Adam was all on the hype train.
8 months. It was fun never playing when I was playing Logan.
I'm sorry, man.
All of a sudden.
I'm sorry. I know. It's mainly because my youth were all like, Logan, you got to play Fortnite. I'm like, okay. And now I'm down the rabbit hole.
Switch it.
Yep. Now I'm down the rabbit hole. Anyway, dear listeners, let's go ahead and move on into What Have You Been Reading, brought to you by Gareth Evans. Matt, good sir, what have you been reading lately?
So the latest book that I read is a short book, very readable. It won't take you very long to read. I highly recommend it. It's a book called Mere Hope, Life in an Age of Cynicism by Jason Duesing. And a shameless plug here, he's the provost of Midwestern Seminary. But even if he was not, this book is actually a really good read. And so I'm not recommending it because he asked me to or anything like that. But it recently came out and I read it and really enjoyed it. So essentially it's a book talking about how, in our lives as Christians now in the 21st century, at least, where we are currently in 2018, there's a tendency for a lot of us to view things very negatively and have a negative outlook, even as believers, seeing, the way that the world is going, and a propensity for us to become cynical in that process. And instead, what he's trying to do is kind of take us and remind us of the hope that we have in Christ and have that sort of transform and change our outlook as believers. So instead, our approach to life is one that's more hopeful and more hope-based rather than allowing ourselves to get kind of, drawn into the mire of cynicism that's present within the rest of the world currently. So I highly recommend it to everybody. It's a great read.
Right on.
Yeah, Dr. Duesing, we knew him from when we were at I knew him from Southwestern too. So
yeah, I was going to say,
he's a great guy for sure.
I think I had a class with him once. He was a really good professor.
And just really excited about the things that are going on at Midwestern, man. There's a lot of good things. I mean, just coming out of the school and the seminary. I mean, for the church, all that stuff has just been really exciting to see Midwestern doing.
Yeah, it's an exciting time to be there. If anyone's interested, let us know. Get connected with us. We'd be happy to have you join us on campus or taking courses online.
There you go. Adam, man, what about you, man? I know you said that Ren's kind of keeping you from reading, but have you had a chance to read anything? Maybe man, a couple words.
I was just looking at my book list for 2018. My goal was two a month. And I've got 2, 4, 6, 7 on the year. So I'm almost averaging out to one probably by the end of the year, about 1 a month. Hopefully I can get back into it again. We've been traveling so much as it is even Ren, that I just haven't, I got a little bit of reading in last week at basketball camp. We were kind of chilling out in between breaks. And when I was like, it's like 8:39, I'm like already about to pass out. So I was pulling up some Kindle stuff on my phone. But I've been reading some Pilgrim's Progress, and really, really, it's my first time reading it through. Everyone's like, every podcast you listen to, and somebody talks about Pilgrim's Progress, so like, this is a must read. I'm like, I've got to read this, and knowing how much Spurgeon loved it, I'm like, I've just got to get around to it. So I think I'm 6 or 7 sections in, or whatever they call it, or stages in. And man, it's been really good. I mean, as Spurgeon would say, it's almost like you're reading the Bible. There's so much scripture in there. There's so much just one-on-one. It's not even imagery. It's basically biblical scripture, just reword. Stories being is talking to all of the different, faithful and all of the different characters, and just seeing it come to life in another way, seeing the scripture come to life in this story, and being able to relate so much. You're seeing the different characters and their names just being whatever. Basically, what their characteristic is their name, and just seeing that kind of flesh out with how they're acting. Just really, really interesting read. And that's one of those books where I'm like, I'm probably going to add another book to my current reading, because this will be a book that I just kind of read throughout the summer. I'm not going to sit down and, I mean, you could read through it. It's an easier read. It's, I think it was originally meant to be a children's book. And so it's not a hard read. But it's just one of those, I'm like, I'm just going to slow roll this, and I'll probably throw another book in, hopefully here soon, if I can get some more time once we get back into our apartment. But really, really enjoying Pilgrim's Progress. And in regards to the word, I've been in Proverbs and Psalms just in my reading. And this week, following up Father's Day and just kind of doing some time of reflection, and there in Proverbs 22, I believe, where it talks about, and I know a lot of us, probably most people listening will know this, but the verse of training up your child in a way that he should go, and even when he is old, he will not depart from it. And so just thinking about some of that as I was reflecting on just my dad and the things that he has taught me and my brother and my sister, and now seeing him as he's getting into retirement here soon, and just seeing the things that he's entrusted to us. And not that I've always been faithful, not that I've always done everything that he's taught me, but just being extremely thankful for the things that he's taught me, even as a child, and now as I experience my first Father's Day as a father. Just that challenge to want to do the same to Ren and to whatever future children God gives us. And so just really dwelling on that. I read that literally yesterday as we were at a doctor's office, talking about some future things with children, and just a really challenging verse, and humbling, and just a lot of gratefulness coming out in that. And so just wanted to share that also.
Right on, man.
Nice.
Well, dear listeners, as far as what I've been reading, I'm going to keep this one brief because I know how squeamish people tend to get when you mention the word sex on a Christian podcast. So I finished up the book, More Than Just the Talk, Becoming Your Kid's Go-To Person About Sex. It's a book aimed towards parents, but I think even youth leaders, pastors, really anybody and everybody in the church that works with students needs to read this book. It's by Jonathan McKee. I'll have a link to it in the show notes. I reco'd it last episode, but now that I finished it, so I don't necessarily agree with every argument he puts forth. I'll save that discussion for people that read the book and then hit me up later to talk about it. But great resource for parents, great resource for youth leaders, adult volunteers, pastors. Really, really good book. It just gets to the bottom of sex, how it's created by God, and really what the Bible says about it, and how our culture gets a lot of that wrong, and how it affects our students, and what we can do to help them understand it better, but also to give them a space to where they can ask questions and not be afraid of how we'll react. And it's great book, very practical, very relevant, which is really, really good. So, dear listeners, you can check that out in the show notes. I highly recommend it. And that is all I will say about the book. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the topic of the show. You probably saw by the name of the episode, the artwork of the show, and the really sick intro with the awesome music from God of War. We're going to be talking about God of War this episode. Not the entire series, just the recent game that came out this year. And so this part of the show brought to you by fellow Sony pony, David Skinner. Now, if you're new to the show for some reason, normally, I don't know why I said it that way. If you're new to the show and you haven't listened to one of these episodes before, kind of what we do is we'll break it down We go through the development history, just a brief run through of that, some of the highlights. The reception, we'll give a quick review, and then we'll break the game down from a biblical worldview. We'll look at the themes and things like that from a biblical world view and see what it gets right, see what it gets wrong. And then that section there is where we enter into spoiler territory. So, dear listeners, if you haven't played the game and you care about spoilers, you can listen up to that point. And then if you don't care about spoilers, or if you played the game, then you can go ahead and listen on through the entire show. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get to the development history of the game here, starting off on December 6th of 2014, where Sony Santa Monica's creative director Cory Barlog confirmed that a new God of War game was in early development at the PlayStation Experience. He said that the game would not be a prequel, but it might be a reboot. Now, later on in 2016, 2 years later, Polygon reported that the concept art of the game had been leaked, showing Norse mythology and different things of that nature. And then in 2016 at E3 was where the game was shown off in a demo showing Kratos and Atreus. Kratos showing Atreus how to hunt with a bow. You battle the troll, as we all know from those of us that have played the game. That's the opening intro to the game. Let me see here. And then in naming the game, Barlog stated that it was deliberately titled God of War with no numeral or subtitle because although it is a continuation of the series, they were reimagining everything. Now, in explaining the transition from Greek mythology to Norse mythology, Barlog said it's kind of like a BC to AD changeover kind of thing. We're moving and starting from zero and kind of moving forward on that. Now, what's interesting about this game is that before settling on Norse mythology, the studio actually considered going the route of Egyptian mythology before settling on Norse mythology. But half the team was for it, and the other half of the team was like, I don't know, there's a lot more civilization involved, it's less isolated, less barren. So they made the decision to stick with Norse mythology, so that way there wouldn't be as many distractions, and they could focus on the theme of Kratos being a stranger in a strange land, which is actually a really cool theme that works well in the game, in my opinion. It was also confirmed that this would not be Kratos' last game. Barlog said that future games could see the series tackling Egyptian or even Mayan mythology, and that although this game focuses on Norse mythology, it alludes to the fact that there are other mythologies coexisting in the world. Now, as we all know, the game was released on April 20th, 2018 for the PlayStation 4. The game received massive amounts of praise. It hit critical acclaim. But specifically, it was praised for its art direction, graphics, combat system, music, story, use of Norse mythology, characters, and cinematic feeling. So basically, all around, the whole game is pretty darn cool. Critics called the game a technical achievement and one of the most impressive-looking games developed for consoles. I mean, seriously, if you play the game in 4K and you look at Kratos' beard, you see the individual strands. It's just really detailed. Many also felt that it had successfully revitalized the series without losing the core identity of its predecessors. During its release week in the UK, God of War became the fastest selling entry in the franchise, selling 35% more physical copies than God of War 3. The game remained at the top of all the format sales charts throughout April and May for 6 consecutive weeks, setting a record for a PlayStation 4 exclusive, having the most consecutive weeks at number 1. It sold 46,091 copies within its first week on sale in Japan, which placed it at number 2 on the sales chart. The game has sold over 3 million copies in 3 days after its release, making it the fastest selling PS4 exclusive. The game was the fastest selling game of the month of its release and contributed to the PS4 being the best selling console of that month. In total, the game sold over 5 million copies in its first month, with 2.1 million in digital sales. So needless to say, this game was like a hotcake. It was just selling like crazy. So darn good. Now guys, we've played it. What do we think of the game? Matt, let's start with you since you're the guest of the honor, man. What is your quick review, your quick elevator pitch, I guess, of God of War? What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? Hit us with it.
Yeah, so I thought as far as the overall package, everything was great that you described, previously, kind of going over the development history and the reception and everything, and that the combat is really well done. Something that's interesting about God of War is that as far as the combat goes and the mechanics and the way that that's structured, it's really set in such a way where the player can customize it based upon sort of their play style or kind of how they want Kratos to react and what they want his powers and abilities to be. So if you're somebody who likes to really focus on more of the hand-to-hand combat, you can tailor it that way and focus on that move set, upgrade those moves and that kind of thing. If you're somebody who wants to use maybe some more of the magical side in terms of what Kratos can do in terms of throwing his axe and things like that, as well as sort of like the runic summons and that kind of thing, you can focus more on that. So it's really balanced out to where it doesn't favor one style of play over another. And so it's really sort of player focused and player tailored in that sense, where you can kind of play it how you want to in that respect. I thought the storytelling was top notch. I love the fact that they intended it all to be sort of this one long take.
Yes.
And so some of you guys are probably aware of that, and I'm sure some of the listeners are as well. That it's the camera never cuts away. It's all just one continuous take of the cameras behind Kratos. And so that's something that I'm not sure that we've seen that in like a AAA title before. You guys maybe can correct me if we have, but I'm pretty sure that that's never been done before in terms of just one long continuous take without any cutscenes whatsoever in a AAA title like that. So I thought that was very impressive as well. And I like the fact that they intended to take Kratos in a more mature direction, than they had in the previous trilogy and the other games, which seemed to be more so on action and, in terms of the amount of combos that you could string together and, the brutality of the kills and the violence. That really seemed to be sort of part and parcel of the original trilogy and some of the other games. But as you were describing it kind of as a reboot of sorts in this sense, I was impressed that they decided to move on from that. Not that the combat isn't there, because it's still there, and in some respects the violence is still there as well, but to kind of take Kratos in a new direction story-wise and maybe sort of mature him as a character, as video games themselves have matured to the point to where, a lot of times now with AAA titles, we're talking about storytellers intending to tell mature stories or stories for mature audiences or for adults that aren't just sort of catering to, a typical video game action-based type audience. So I'm glad that they went that direction, and I think it really worked out well for them.
Yeah, I totally agree. Adam, what about you, man?
Yeah, I think Matt hits a ton of things just there at the end. I mean, I think we've discussed it multiple times over the last, few months of basically how games are maturing with their audience. And I say that as really our generation being those ones that were playing the Super Nintendo. Maybe 5-10 years older than us also. But like, we were one of those first generations that we grew up playing the Nintendo, the Super Nintendo, the 64, and so on. And we've matured with each system. And I think the storytelling in many ways has matured. I was at a movie the other day, and I was just thinking, I'm like, okay, this is a 2-hour movie at most. I was watching Tomb Raider. I saw the new Tomb Raider the other day, and I'm like, man, there's a lot of the video game in this movie, and I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was fun. It wasn't, it's Tomb Raider, so it was a little bit ridiculous, but nothing over the top. I thought it was one of the better video games movie. But as I'm watching, I'm like, man, I got more story in the video game, and that's why I enjoyed the video game. They only could give me so much in the movie in that 2 hours, but in a 15-hour video game, I got so much more. And so I think a lot of what Matt's talking there is just the storytelling in this game was much more, matured, and almost felt like a focus. As good as the combat was, it was all of the other stuff that I think really made this game great, whether that's the father-son relationship that we'll get into more later, whether that's as you're in this boat, for all of this time, the little stories you're getting in there, and how they'll pause. We'll come back to that later. In a lot of games, it would either continue or it would just cut off awkwardly. And then when you get back in the boat, it might pick up back. But the way that they even transitioned that stuff, done exceptionally well. I'm pretty sure, like Matt said, it is the first game that was one long cut. I do believe I'm trying to remember what game it is. But there's another game coming out this fall or next year that's also going to be cut in a similar way where there's no loading screens. I can't remember which one it is. Shoot, off the top of my head. But yeah, I saw news recently. It's going to be like the second game, and that's why I remembered just what you were saying. It was the first one. So that may be something that begins to come along. But I mean, this game, I don't see how it's not. I need to go back. There's a lot that I left on the table. And for me, as the listeners know, I'm a guy, I buy a game, I play it, I resell it to go back into fun to buy other games. There's a ton of games. I'm not the guy that gets the platinum trophy, and I don't think I'll get the platinum trophy in this game. But it's a game that's like, okay, I'm not going to sell this anytime soon because I'm going to want to get back in there and play it. And for me to do that, like I don't do that with many games. I've done it with Zelda, Mario Odyssey, and now God of War. Those are the only 3 games where it's like not even crossing my mind of like, this is a game I need to keep because it's been that good. And so that's just some of the initial comments on the game. But yes, such an amazing game. And this is for me, I did not like the originals. I tried to go back and play them. It was just a ton of button mashing. And going back to what Matt said, the way that you can customize your gameplay and your style. Again, just thinking about this today as I was putting my notes together, depending on what runes you're using and what like attacks that you have Atreus doing, whether that's the wolves or the hawks or whatever, the vultures or whatever that would what they were, whatever, you can mix those in. If you're an axe guy or if you're the chaos, what are these things like not the swords, what are they called?
The chaos blades.
Chaos blades. Whether you're a guy that likes the chaos blades more, I mean, again, there was a lot of personalization. That is like, I guarantee I played the game in many ways differently than both of you guys did, and that's what they wanted. Whether you're a guy who likes to use the shield more, or even go bare fisticuffs. I had a couple runes. They weren't even top tier runes, but they fit the way that I wanted to play. And so I continue to use a lower level rune because they fit my playstyle more than some of the higher level ones. For that stuff to be in a game, like, that says something, because a lot of games are like, I just got to have the best gear and I can push my way through. No, because I had customized it so much, it made sense for me to stick with my model that I like instead of messing it all up because it would give me better stats. That says a lot about a game.
Yeah, man. Well, dear listeners, I'm going to preface this and echo what Adam said. Played through the original trilogy games, hated them. I honestly don't know why I kept playing them. So for this game here, I'm gonna say this, and you guys you guys can tell what I think about the game. It gets my platinum seal of approval. Got the platinum trophy for the game. Thoroughly enjoyed all like 40 some odd hours I put into this game. Really, really good storytelling. Really good character dynamics. And plus, I'm a sucker for a good father-son story. It hits me right in the feels. Gets me to tear up a little bit. I cheer them on when they get victories. I weep with them when they hit the sad moments. And then there's times where I just want to, push Atreus down a little bit because he's being a little bit of a punk. So, great game. Made me feel all the feels. Really enjoyed it. Like I said, it gets my platinum seal of approval. So I really enjoyed the game. But without further ado, let's just dive right into the theme. So again, dear listeners, this is the point where if you care about spoilers, you haven't played the game, this is where you tune out, because we're going to dive into spoilers. We're going to break this game down. Now that I think about it, we might have already said a spoiler already, but oh well, you'll get over it. It'll be okay. So with that being said, 3, 2, 1, we are in spoiler territory. You missed your chance to turn back. We are at a point of no return. And something I want to talk about real quick, because I think we can spend the whole entire rest of the episode on this. I want to make sure that we at least get to it. Is this theme of fatherhood or parenthood, because this was something that the game kind of got slammed with a little bit. I can't remember by which news outlet specifically, but they were talking about how the game showed toxic masculinity. And I think that the game itself does show masculinity in a way that we probably, at least here in American culture, is we're not quite used to seeing. At least we haven't seen it in a while, because as you follow Kratos throughout this game, you see him trying to come to grips with fatherhood, being a present father, and what that means, and how he has to be tenderhearted, how he has to be stern sometimes. Really, really cool showcase. So, Matt, I think this might have been what caught my eye on Twitter, that you were talking about this specifically. But what about God of War? I guess what are some ways that it handles this theme correctly, or what are some things that we can discuss from this perspective?
In terms of manhood specifically?
Yeah. In terms of manhood specifically.
Well, I mean, you have to kind of take it within the context. And I realize, with a reboot, it's designed to be in such a way where, even though they're technically continuing the story from the previous trilogy, someone could actually pick up God of War, 2018 here, and play it without any context from the previous trilogy and still get the main story, understand what's going on, and that kind of thing. But in terms of fleshing it out overall, in terms of its view of manhood, I think it's actually helpful to have some of the context of the original trilogy of the main games, in which Kratos is basically a jerk in that trilogy, right?
Yes.
I mean, yeah. So I mean, basically, he has sort of pretty much one way of expressing himself, which is more or less anger.
Yeah.
And so that that gets translated in terms of how violent he is, and some of the actions that he performs in the original trilogy. So when you go from that to, say, the very first scene of God of War in this, the 2018 game here, it's almost sort of like jarring, right? If you have this view of Kratos from the previous games, and now all of a sudden you're seeing him very calm, very collected, almost sort of emotional in a sense, whenever he puts his hand on, the handprint there on that final tree that he's cutting down for his wife's funeral pyre, you get this sort of sense of emotional depth to him that was completely absent in the original trilogy.
Yeah.
So if you're coming to it from that context, you're like, whoa, sort of, wait a second, what's going on here? Kratos is this really big, strong character who expresses himself through aggression and anger and stuff based upon what I know of him the previous trilogy. And now all of a sudden here at the very beginning of the game, he's sort of this more calm and collected and emotional character instead. And so your mind is kind of like trying to parse that out in terms of exactly what that means. And even there from the very beginning, you understand and you kind of see that this is going to be a different Kratos, or that he's changed somewhat. And so that the view of manhood that might emerge from that is going to be one that's more nuanced, and maybe one that's more balanced than sort of, the machismo and macho strong guy that you saw there in the original trilogy. So that's at least sort of the initial context that's forming your understanding of what manhood is there. And then, but secondly, that's going to be manifest most especially in his relationship with Atreus that develops throughout the course of the game. And so I don't know if you want to maybe like save that whenever we get into fatherhood or whatever, but at least in terms of the initial frame of reference that you have for his manhood, you understand that it's a more balanced view of manhood there at the very beginning than what you saw, say, in the previous trilogy.
Yeah. And I think for me, what was kind of surprising about that is like, it is definitely jarring. If you've played the past games and you start this game up, it is a jarring experience seeing Kratos like this, but it's almost like you've known, like you knew someone in high school, like they were the boisterous jock, that was kind of aggressive, and you meet them years later and they're this calm, collective person. It's like, wow, definitely there's been things in your life that have changed you, but it's almost like you've grown up, so to speak, or you kind of matured a little bit. And I think that kind of lends itself well to the age group of people that played these games who were younger, and now they're playing this game as they're older, and they've probably gone through different life experiences and they've grown up, maybe matured a little bit. And so I think it lends itself well to a little bit of the mystery of the game. Like, you want to know what has Kratos seen, and how has he changed, and just really what's going on with this character. It makes it more interesting than what he used to be, so to speak, when he was just shouting out Calliope and breaking things, But now he has to wrestle with this, because you mentioned it there that at the beginning of the game, they're setting a funeral pyre for his wife, and so now it's just him and Atreus. He has to kind of take charge here. He has to really watch out for him because, as you learn throughout the game, it seems like his Atreus' mother was there the entire time, really raising him, while Kratos was off doing who knows what, and so now Kratos has to basically be ever more present. He has to be the dad that Atreus needs, which I think is an interesting concept that they show that Atreus needs his dad, and he even voices that several times. So maybe we can touch on that a little bit. And Adam, maybe you want to talk about this here, just kind of Atreus' need for a father, Kratos' recognition of that calling to be a father. Let's kind of go that route with the discussion.
Well, I think one of the most memorable, if not the most memorable scene in the movie, and since we're in spoiler, is he's in, I think, Alfheim, the first main world that you kind of go to with all the flying, like, sea people or whatever. And so you kind of step in, you're trying to get, I don't remember what it is, if it's a stone, or I think it's a stone. You kind of step in, and Kratos is kind of roaming from cutscene to cutscene. He's like stumbling, he's chasing like his wife. And for Kratos, it seems like it's been a minute or two. It's been very quick. But then he gets pulled out of the world by Atreus, and Atreus is like, "Where were you? Like, I needed you. Where were you when I needed you?" And he's, super emotional. Like, it was an emotion. It's just an emotional scene. Like, even just watching it and seeing, like, he had to fight and kill all of these creatures on his own and survive while his dad was off doing something else. And I think that's something that, that's early in the game, and that's kind of the breaking point at that moment for Atreus, because he gets so mad, and that's where he starts referencing, this is how it's always been. You've never been around when I've needed you. And this was just another example, so much that, like, I almost died because you weren't there. And he's just like yelling at him, "Where were you? Where were you? I needed you." And he's and Kratos is kind of confused of like what do you mean? It was only moments, but yet Atreus is just freaking out on him.
Yeah.
And just doing some reading on the game from the director's perspective, Corey Barlog. He's done so much great PR just sharing his story in this game and how it relates to his relationship with his son. I'm just going to read this quote. He says, and this is on, I want to give credit where credit is due. This is on an interview on The Guardian. I've got the link in there, Logan, if you want to use it for the show notes. But in this interview, he says, so much of it being the relation reflects our relationship and my desires. That he says, I would love to go on an adventure with him, his son, and I hope that he would want to, that we wouldn't have this awkward relationship that unfortunately we have right now because I work so much. Because Kratos wasn't around much in Atreus' early years, Atreus interprets that as, you don't love me, you don't want to spend time with me, it's obvious that I don't live up to your expectations. And he says, and that's the end of the quote, and then Barlog goes on to say, I'm trying to be better with my son and regret every moment that I'm not spending with him. And so there's kind of that tension of, Atreus in many ways is thinking, you're off in this world doing who knows what, but yet you're not there when I really need you. And that's because you don't love me. You don't want to spend time with me. And really, in many ways, I don't meet some expectation because I'm not as big, as strong as you are. And so, but Kratos on the other end, he doesn't realize how long he's really gone and what his son's really feeling and what his son's really going through. And that whole adventure that they go on is for his son. The whole story is yes, they're taking the ashes of the mom to this mountain, but it's really about Atreus. Most of the story in that relationship. And so just really interesting. and how that so often goes on in our world today. I've been blessed to have a dad, and I spoke to that earlier, who was around, who was involved, who didn't miss stuff. And there's probably some of that where I look at some things maybe with rose-colored glasses, but I always remember my dad being at my sporting events. I don't ever, if it was a big one, he was always there. I never had and some different things in life. Maybe, my dad being a pastor, we had to cut vacation short because someone in the church died and he had to get back for the funeral. We had to, he might have to leave something that was important for ministry, but I never took that, thankfully, by God's grace, as I never got bitter over that. But, so I see that in my life as a blessing, but I'm sure there's a ton of listeners who have a very similar story that they can relate to this. So as they are playing this game, they're probably thinking, I relate to Atreus more than not, who felt like he had a dad who didn't care, a dad who didn't love him, a dad who didn't want to spend time with him. Maybe even because, and we've kind of hinted at this, because Kratos has this, he's this image of burly, big, tough, strong, keep all your feelings and emotions inward. And that is the opposite of Atreus, because in Atreus's early years, his mom didn't raise him. So she taught him to show his emotion. You don't have to be this. And so you see this kind of tension of who Atreus has been taught to be, who his dad is, and him trying to obtain that but not feeling like he can. So that's just some of that as I think about the game and looking back on a lot of that, it's like it says a ton about, manhood. It says a ton about fatherhood and that relationship, that father-son relationship. And the game deals with it. It's not perfect. Yeah, Kratos is a jaded character. And while this game is a reboot, it doesn't ignore the prior three.
Yeah.
Those hints, and that explains a lot of that. Like, he is to be. And I think that's, we don't have to go into it now, but that's another kind of story of this game show had something in that doesn't have to be who you are now. You can make those adjustments. You can make those changes. You can't erase them. And that's Kratos. He's like, I can't erase who I was and what I've done. And he tries to hide that throughout the game. There's that big point in the middle of the game where he finally tells Atreus who Atreus is, but also who he is and what he's done. And so there's a ton to the game. I know I'm bouncing all over, but there's just so much in this game that deals with these different themes.
Yeah, you'll notice too that, you mentioned in terms of Kratos eventually revealing some of that to Atreus. The sins of the parents, if you will, are a major theme of the game too, and not just in terms of Kratos, but also if you pay close attention in relation to Freya's relationship with Baldur, right? In terms of what she did to him, or by making it so that he couldn't feel any pain and, couldn't be killed and that sort of thing. She essentially sort of robbed him of what life actually is. And, he resents her for that and actually wants to kill her because of that. And in reality, that was a selfish decision on her part, right? To do that because she was so afraid of losing him and she was so afraid of something happening to him that she felt like she had to use, the magic that was present to her as a goddess to be able to protect him in that manner. And it ended up sort of backfiring in a sense. Well, likewise, also with Kratos, you get this sort of sense in which he recognizes what he's done in the past, and he's almost, I want to say ashamed of it, but at the same time, there's certain indications where, you see Kratos in the way that he acts, and you sometimes feel like he feels shame towards those past actions, and other times where he doesn't really feel as much shame as you would expect. But at least insofar as his relationship with Atreus is concerned, he's ashamed of his actions in the past to the point to where he doesn't want to give Atreus the full story, and he wants to kind of protect him from that in a sense. Right. So if you remember, I guess like the scene when they are in Tyr's vault, where all the treasure is and everything. And Kratos actually finds that jar, from Greek civilization and everything, and it's actually him, right? He's been painted onto that jar, and he throws it down and breaks it in order to try to prevent Atreus seeing that and recognizing him on the jar and then asking him questions. Well, why, Dad, were you on that jar? And you're holding the blades of chaos there, and that kind of thing or whatever. So I mean, you have this sense in which the sins of the parents are also focused on here, and I can't help but wonder if maybe there's a sense of that in terms of Corey Barlog or maybe some of the other designers or developers incorporating some of their own experience into that as well, in an understanding of, even if they wouldn't necessarily have a conception of sin like we would from a Christian perspective, in recognizing that, if you're going to be a parent, you're going to make mistakes along the way. You're going to do things that you are going to later regret in terms of the way that you handled yourself with your kids, or the way that you treated them, the way that you were maybe too selfish at some point when you should have been spending more time with them. All these sorts of things that are just going to naturally be part of that process because you're a fallen human being. And so I can't help but wonder if some of that is being translated into those characters of both Kratos and Freya there, in terms of the mistakes that they made, and a recognition of, as much as you can try to protect your children from the mistakes that you've made as a parent, eventually you're going to have to own up to them at some point. And if from a Christian perspective, of course, we would want to confess those, right, to our kids and repent of those and ask them for their forgiveness. That's not going to be something that translates exactly into the narrative there in God of War, but at least in Kratos' sense, as far as the story beat goes there, he does finally kind of sit Atreus down and explain to a certain extent what his past was like and what he did in the past, and why he doesn't want Atreus to follow him down that path once it's revealed to Atreus that he is also a god.
Yeah, and I think with that, one of the, especially when it comes to the kind of comparison between Kratos and Freya, they almost seem to handle that particular thing about their past in two different ways. I mean, Kratos finally gets to a point where he just sits Atreus down and tells him, like, look, this is what's going on. Whereas Freya and Baldur don't really have that conversation until the very end of the game, and Baldur kind of learns about it on his own without his mother telling him, because I think him and Kratos wind up in Helheim, and that's where he learns about it. And so it's interesting to see those two situations play out in two different ways. One where Kratos just owns up to it, and one where Freya keeps trying to hide it and to protect Baldur, but it really just winds up doing more harm than good. And it's an interesting parallel, and I think there's something there to say about, all throughout Scripture it talks about, confessing your sins, bringing those things to light. Don't let the sun set on your anger, and all those things. It's basically just like, take care of that stuff just as soon as possible. Don't let it linger. Don't let it fester. Don't let it just hide out somewhere. Take care of it. And I think you see the effects of that, whether or not Sony Santa Monica meant to have this be in the game or not, but you see what happens when you try to hide that stuff, and it just seems to never really be good when you hide sin, period. You have to bring that stuff out in the open, and you have to bring it to light. Otherwise, it's going to continue to bring destruction and wreck those relationships and bring hurt into the situation there.
Well, I think even with that, think of the freedom that Kratos got when he finally got that out. That was a lot of the tension, is how is Atreus going to respond when he finds out that he is a demigod, but also when he finds out that I am a god, and all the things that I did, but yet the freedom that came from that. And Atreus responding to his own stuff, and just the hilarious things that he said once he found out. But I think that's just another one of those things with our sin. So often we work so hard to hide our sin, especially within the Christian community, instead of finding a moment, finding a brother, whether even to God, confessing that to the Lord, seeking forgiveness, seeking reconciliation, and the freedom that comes from that. Then you're not bound by it. Once Kratos confessed that, told those things to his son, got it on the table, that's when he really began to change. That's when he really began to, release himself from who he was. And I think that's where he, somewhere in there, or towards the end, he starts saying that line of, we don't have to be, we will be the gods we chose to be, not those who we've been or those who've been. And so like that doesn't happen if he doesn't finally get off his chest who he has been.
Yeah.
What he has done. You're living under too much guilt in those situations. So just a ton of overlapping there going on.
Yeah. And even when it comes to Kratos, I mean, you see him wrestle with this idea of, can he even be redeemed? Can he be better than what he's been? Or is this monster from the past 3 games, I guess 4 games, counting the one on PSP, can he move beyond this to be better, to be a better example for his son? And he wrestles with this idea of, is his son doomed to walk the same steps that he's walked? And so you have this heavy, burdensome theme of redemption and him wondering if he can even be redeemed and move beyond that. And I think it's powerful. And that's one thing that kind of resonated with me, because I mean, I think we all kind of wrestle with that thought at some point in our lives. Is like, when we come to Christ, or at least we hear about the gospel, we wonder, can this even be for me? Like, I've done some bad things in my past. Can I even be forgiven of that? And Kratos wrestles with these same thoughts. Granted, he's not going to Christ, but he wrestles with that idea of, can I be redeemed with the past that I've left in my wake? Can I be better? Matt, what do you think? What do you think about that theme?
Yeah, I think that's present. I think a lot of the redemption that he seeks, he views himself as sort of being beyond redemption in a way, in terms of what he has done in the past and what he has to do. I think that kind of comes out a little bit when later on he essentially has no choice but to go back to their house, right, or their cabin, and retrieve the blades of chaos, which he has hidden there in the house. These representative of his past and the things that he's done in the past. Well, he has no choice. He's not going to be able to enter into Helheim and be able to get what he needs in order to save Atreus at that point, unless he has a weapon that he can use against the beings that are going to be there. And the blades of chaos are his only option. So he has to face his past in that sense. And I think that he understands, in a sense, that I wouldn't say that he's beyond redemption, but he sort of views himself as beyond redemption. And at that point in the narrative too, with his focus shifting toward Atreus and his need to save Atreus, I think he views Atreus as kind of his means of redemption. And what I mean by that is, he wants Atreus to be better than he was, or he wants Atreus to be what he could not be. And you get that later on, after he has, saved Atreus with Freya's help and everything. And then he and Atreus are, I guess it's back in Tyr's vault or whatever. And there's that scene there between the two of them whenever he gives Atreus the other knife, that he made. And that was, I can't remember, was that the mother's, was that Faye's knife or another copy of it? I can't remember exactly what goes on, or the dynamic of that, but he gives it to him, and he tells him something along the lines of, what it means to be a man, and that I made an extra copy of this knife, for this moment in your life, and this is the point at which I tell you as my son that I want you to be better than I am, and to recognize the potential that you have now, and realizing that you're this God and everything. But at the same time, you're a God too, just as I am a God, but I want you to be a better God than I was. I want you to sort of make up for the mistakes that I've made in my past. So I think that there's that dynamic in which he views redemption from that perspective, where it's not so much that he thinks that he's going to be able to redeem himself, as much as he thinks that Atreus is going to be the means by which he may be redeemed. And I think there's a little bit of an element of that too, when they're foreshadowing later on, whenever Kratos and Atreus finally make it up to the top of the highest peak in Jotunheim, and they realize, that everything that's happened on their journey has been prophetically foretold, right, by the drawings that are there inside that area on the walls. And if you remember, it's very slight or very subtle, but there's part of that drawing that's hidden sort of behind this curtain that he sees. And we're not exactly sure what to make of the artwork, but it almost sort of looks like Kratos is going to end up having to die at some point, maybe in one of the future games, in order for Atreus to reach this potential of who he is intended to be. And so there's going to be sort of this sacrificial element that's maybe coming along. But at the same time, Kratos is not ready for Atreus to know that. So if you notice, he kind of covers that up, right? Or redirects Atreus' attention so that he doesn't see what's foretold there on the wall. So I think he has this sort of innate understanding of, if I'm going to be redeemed, it's going to be through my son, because I myself am not going to be able to redeem myself. And of course, I think that we could draw obvious Christian parallels there, right? In terms of that none of us are able to redeem ourselves from our sins and what we've done. And it is, in fact, through a son that each of us has to be redeemed, through God's son, whom he willingly gave up for us in the sacrifice that he made on the cross to save us from our sins. None of us are capable of redemption. And we all have to sort of innately understand that and recognize our position as being in need of salvation that only God can provide in order for us to be able to receive that salvation. So I think there's kind of a parallel there in terms of what Kratos is realizing through Atreus and what we ourselves ultimately have to realize about ourselves and our inability to save ourselves.
Man, about to bring out the gospel right there, and I'm about ready to go. Let's do this. So we're kind of running short on time, but real quick, the one thing I wanna definitely hit on before we go is, does this game get? I'm trying to think how to actually word this, so I'm just gonna word it and then we'll parse it out as best we can. Does this game get manhood right?
I mean, you kind of hinted at this earlier of like, we don't maybe see a lot of this. I think it all depends on your situation of how much this gets seen. You have Kratos' figure of manhood, of, again, keep everything inside. Don't share anything with anyone. If life knocks you down, you got to get back up. If someone punches you, you got to punch them back.
Yeah, like conceal, don't feel.
Anger. And so there are a lot of aspects to his character that, of course, within our culture, within the church, we would not embrace. But I think you see the tension throughout the entire game of Kratos doesn't know. We've been discussing this whole game. Kratos doesn't know what to do. Like, there's been multiple times where Atreus has this emotional moment, but he doesn't know anything different than keep it in, be tough. But you can see it in his face, and that's, with graphics that we can even tell these things. You can see it with his demeanor, with his face, that there's a couple times where he wants to reach out, but he doesn't, because that's not what he knows. And that's the type of manhood that, I don't know if it was taught, that he has lived out. And so I think you have moments throughout the game where you learn something. I'm not saying we learn it. You learn some things through the game of like, okay, this is a better picture. So as they're taking you through the story, they show you some different things of, okay, this is a better picture than keeping everything concealed. There's a better way through the confession, revealing those things. So I wouldn't say that the game, I think they show things throughout that they want you to understand as better, as good. But if you're looking at specific characters, I wouldn't say that Kratos, of course, is the brimming example of this is manhood, this is fatherhood. I wouldn't say that for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with Adam. It's a yes and no kind of answer, right? There are certain aspects in which it does get it right, and then there are plenty of other aspects in which it's flawed. And Logan, you have kind of alluded to, my tweets that I had tweeted about the game, at least initially, that kind of drew your attention. It is a flawed understanding of manhood and a flawed understanding of fatherhood. But my point in tweeting about that was that at least the creators of God of War are trying, right? At least they're trying to understand that dynamic and present that in the medium of a video game through interactive storytelling and bringing the player in as a participant in that process. And, it's going to vary, I would think, in terms of just how far the player identifies with Kratos. I mean, obviously, we can't go too far down that route in terms of, some of the things that Kratos has done in the past and the ways that he even behaves in this game. But yeah. I mean, I think as far as some of the flaws go that are present there, we can recognize them as flaws. And even those who don't have a Christian understanding or those who don't have, the Holy Spirit within them still can kind of recognize on the basis of common grace what is correct and what is incorrect there, or what's good or what is flawed about the way that Kratos behaves as a father, behaves as a man, or treats Atreus. I think one of the things that's very telling is, the fact that Kratos is so powerful. And, at one point in the narrative, if you remember, whenever he brings down, this huge monstrous dragon there in the mountain, he's powerful enough to slay something like that, to slay a huge monstrous dragon. But at the same time, when it comes to having a meaningful conversation with Atreus as his son, it's like something that small is almost too difficult for him to handle. Like, he doesn't have a way to sort of conceive of, how do I relate to my son? So there's kind of, this irony in a sense that he's such this huge, powerful threat and powerful being who can do these amazing feats. Yet when it comes to just having a conversation with his son and understanding his son, it's almost like he's incapable of doing that. And granted, he kind of develops over the course of the game and gets better at that as he goes along. But even still, by the end of the game, he's not quite there, right? He's not quite the father that he needs to be in terms of his understanding of Atreus. And where the game leaves off, for the further sequels that are going to be coming down the road, I'm hoping that as they progress, we will continue to see development in Kratos's character as he becomes more like the father that he needs to be to Atreus. I'm hoping that they go that direction. I mean, of course, there's no guarantee, but I would like to see that in the future games.
Yeah, same here. I think it may not be a perfect picture. I agree with you guys that at least they're trying, and hopefully we'll see more of that kind of get fleshed out in future games. And one of the cool things I think that I know of, at least one of my friends who's playing the game with his son, and they're talking about it as they go through it. I think it'd be a cool game for parents to play with their kids if their kids are interested in it, or even if you, the parent, are interested in it, and you can have those conversations with your kids. But that being said, I mean, like I said, we're running out of time on this one, but and I know we haven't hit every bit of this game. There's so much depth to this game.
5 episodes to do that.
Yeah, for sure. We could do a whole new series. We could just do the State of God of War series of episodes. But yeah, dear listeners, so if we miss anything, let us know on the Patreon, the YouTube, Facebook, wherever. I just said the YouTubes. Just hit us up, and we can further that discussion from there. But with that being said, episode 120 is coming to a close. But before we let you go, as always, some Recos brought to you by Eric Bryant, one of our dear VIPs supporting us at the $25 tier on patreon.com. Matt, man, what should our dear listeners check out this week?
Well, hopefully everyone knows that it's the World Cup going on currently. So even if you're not a soccer fan, I recommend that you still at least try to tune in to some matches, or maybe even go online and watch some highlights, because I mean, soccer truly is the beautiful game and the world's sport, the most popular sport in the world, something that the entire world, the entire earth right now is tuning into and watching, and for many, millions of people actually have a stake in it in terms of their national teams and everything. And so, there's a lot of excitement, a lot of drama there. Even if you think soccer is a boring sport, I'm pretty sure that you'd probably be able to find some highlights that would impress you, even if you're not a soccer fan. And if you have some free time on your hands, try to catch an actual full match and see the highest level of play that's available right now. It's definitely worth your time.
Right on.
Matt, Matt, who are you pulling for now that the USA isn't there?
Yeah, that's a good question. This is going to sound really strange, I guess, because it has absolutely nothing to do with talent or any favorite players or anything. But Iceland, because I've always wanted to visit Iceland. I think it's an amazing country based on everything that I've learned about it. And so for some reason, I'm like, well, Iceland is still in the World Cup. I think I'll pull for them. So
it's an underdog story.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it's kind of unfortunate. I was actually planning on going this year. I was served overseas for a couple years, learned Russian. I have a buddy who's in a host city who he just moved to a host city. So I was planning on going, then USA didn't make it, and I'm like, yeah, not going anymore. So it was unfortunate. But my Reco, mine is check out MoviePass. I know this isn't necessarily a new thing. There's probably a lot of people that use it. If you're not familiar, for whatever reason, it's basically, and I think even today they've started to adjust it a little bit, but essentially you can pay $10 a month and you can go see a movie a day at the theater, but you can't repeat movies. So if I've seen Solo once, I can't go the next day and see Solo again on the MoviePass. So I can see each movie one time for $10. My friend actually gifted. You can do referrals, and if you accept a referral, you can get a month for free. So I've seen 3 or 4 movies now. I think 4 movies for free, because my friend shared MoviePass. So if any of you guys are looking to get a MoviePass, I've got a couple referrals left. I can hook you, the first 2 dear listeners to reach out to me, and it's sweet. I mean, you just go to your phone, you click on it, you check in. They send you like a debit card in the mail. You click on the movie and check in, and they like put the money on the card, and you can just go up to the kiosk, pay for your movie and go in. It's that easy. So check it out if you're a big movie goer, especially with the good movies coming out in the summer. I've seen, like I said, 4 of them now, and one of them being Incredibles 2. Man, that's another Reco. That movie is so good. It's better than the first one for sure.
Yeah, definitely check that out.
It's so good. So good. The way that they do Jack, man, what a fun character.
Right on. Well, as far as my recos go, then this one is a little more. I guess I won't spend too much time on it just because it's kind of become a soft spot for me recently, and a little bit of a sad note, I guess. One of the things I wasn't really prepared for in ministry is when you do home visits to elderly members in your church, especially ones that have difficulty kind of getting around. A lot of their friends are gone for one reason or another, and their family just isn't really around a whole lot either. So that being said, dear listeners, if you have some elderly members in your church, go visit them. Just hang out at their house. Talk with them, maybe do a Bible study with them, pray with them. You do not know how big of a difference that makes in their lives, and how much of an encouragement that is. They'll tell you that they enjoy it, but you will not know how much that means to them. Just because it's huge. So that being said, if you have some elderly members in your church, not like your elders, I mean like senior citizens, go visit them, hang out with them. If they haven't been to church in a while, definitely give them a call. Go visit them, and who knows, maybe you can even bring your phone over there, get them hooked on Fortnite, and y'all can play Fortnite together, which is my other reco, is play some Fortnite. Again, I'm 8 months too late on this one. I'm sorry, Adam and everybody else, but play some Fortnite, enjoy it, and if you're on there, hit me up on it as well, and maybe we can get Adam playing as well with us. But that being said, dear listeners, thank you for checking out this episode of The Reformed Gamers. As always, if you like what we do here on the show and you want to lend your support, you can go over to patreon.com/TheReformedGamers. Even support as low as $1 a month helps this show continue running and helps us grow and makes a huge difference. You can also head over to youtube.com/TheReformedGamers, where we'll upload these episodes as well as always. And then you can also head over to our website, thereformedgamers.wordpress.com. We'll have show notes, articles like the problem with The Last of Us 2 that I put up this past week. You can check those articles out on the website. And you can also follow us on Twitter at TRG Podcast or in the Facebook group. Matt, good sir, again, man, thank you so much for joining us on this episode and helping us talk about this game. Always, I meant appreciate. We appreciate you doing that, man.
Sure, I appreciate the invitation. I had a great time.
Yeah, man. I don't know. We might have to keep you around because you did a really good. Well, I'm just saying, dear listeners, make it a hashtag or something. I don't know. But anyway, Matt, thanks again for coming on, man. It was really good stuff. Dear listeners, as always, if you want to talk more about God of War or anything else, you can hit us up on one of those avenues that we just went through. But until next time, GG and amen.